Crown Jewel heads down under, and I've got 5 more wins for you next. Coming off a bust at Wrestlepalooza, WWE decides to go with an 8 a.m. start for its second PLE on ESPN. Not great, WWE, but I won't bust as we pick each winner for Crown Jewel. So let's start with our recap, and I went 4-1 at Wrestlepalooza, with the only loss being Io Sky losing to Stephanie Vaquer, and I wish I had not listened to the dirt sheets, as the last thing I saw was that the Crown Jewel Championships would not take place in Australia. So seeing the correct info might have made me change my mind on this, but I wish I had listened to myself in my prior videos, as I had said that Io's reign was so bad that they simply wouldn't go back to it. But guess what? The current feud with Asuka is the best thing on TV, and it doesn't even need a title, while Stephanie and Tiffy immediately have underwhelmed in the worst way possible. So, bad call for me admittedly, but based on the aftermath, WWE probably should have gone with Io. So while I lost a half unit on that bet, I bet pretty big at Wrestlepalooza, and it paid off as I was up 2.25 units for the entire show. But 4-1 barely moves the needle on our record, as I'm now 42-9 since BackLash, and those 2.25 units have put us in double digits at plus 10.75 units since BackLash. So yeah, you really should be coming here for the best predictions. Let's talk about the history of Crown Jewel for betting purposes, and this is the 7th Crown Jewel, but unlike the prior 6, this one is in Perth, Australia, so we have no traditional championship matches to talk about. So let's talk about the Crown Jewel Championships instead, as the Saudis always need some extra spectacle, so last year they came up with the terrible idea to have the most ridiculous looking championship belts for a champion versus championship match. And I correctly picked both underdogs to win last year, when Rhodes was at plus 300 and Liv Morgan was at plus 150 in their matches. And I also noted several times that I just didn't see the king and queen of the ring winners also winning the Crown Jewel Championship. And both Gunther and Nia lost there. So no issues with the women for this year, as Jade won the Queen of the Ring, but she is not in this match. But Rhodes is the King of the Ring, so let's keep that in mind for later. But we are actually in Australia this year, so this is just the 3rd PLE in Australia, with the first being the Super Showdown on October 6, 2018, though that was in Melbourne and not Perth. And the only particularly noteworthy thing is that both matches with Australian-born wrestlers won at that PLE, with the Iconics beating Asuka and Naomi, and Buddy Murphy beating Cedric Alexander to win the Cruiserweight title. But much more relevant was the Elimination Chamber on February 24th, 2024 in Perth, as we saw the Australian-born Rhea Ripley retain her women's world title in the main event of the show. However, aside from Grayson Waller's Grayson Waller effect, Indy Hartwell was the only other Australian-born wrestler on the card, and she and Candice LeRae lost a tag team title match to the Kabuki Warriors on the pre-show. So the conclusion is, we can't say that the Aussies will always win every match, but so far, they've won 3 out of 4. So let's get to these matches and start with the aforementioned Kabuki Warriors taking on the Australian-born Rhea Ripley and their former family member in Io Sky. So Rhea and Io are the favorites at minus 1500, while the Kabuki Warriors are the underdogs at plus 600. So why should Rhea and Io win this one? Well, first off, Rhea's in this match, and she is the native daughter here, and she already main evented the Elimination Chamber in Perth last time around, and with Rhea and Io both already in an incredible triple threat match at WrestleMania 41, and they were the main event at Evolution, it is safe to say that these two are the most highly thought of women's wrestlers on Raw at the moment. And nothing is truly on the line here, so wouldn't it just be great to see these two win, and particularly to have Mommy go home with a win in front of the home crowd. And there's also a possibility of Kairi having enough of Asuka here and turning on her during the match to hand Rio a win. But why the Kabuki Warriors? So as far as the story goes, I tend to give the heels the first win in a series, and we know that Io and Asuka rivalry does not end tonight. And in fact, it only makes sense that we have these four on opposite sides of the War Games match. So as of now, I'm lining it up as Rhea, Io, Lyra, guaranteed to be in that match, and then two of the four of Stephanie, AJ, Nikki, and Bayley, versus a guaranteed Asuka and Kairi, with admittedly Kairi having a very small chance of a face turn. But also Roxanne and Raquel will definitely be in this match, and probably also Becky is the fifth, but I suppose Bayley's role model side could prevail and be present on that side of the match as well. So despite the storyline slightly favoring the Kabuki Warriors, with Saturday night's main event and 7 whole weeks until Survivor Series, I think we actually have enough time for once to develop this War Games match appropriately, so I simply think Australia gets to cheer on their hometown hero once more here, so Rhea and Io are the pick, and we'll even make this a half unit bet. The only other Australian-born wrestler is Bronson Reed, and he's apparently never lost an Australian street fight, but he's still the underdog at plus 225, while Roman Reigns is the favorite at minus 350. So why should Reigns win here? Well, this is Roman Reigns we're talking about, so do we need to say anything more than that? With Raw also in Perth, the Usos will certainly be on hand to help, and even though Roman said that he does not want their help, I have a feeling that they'll be helping anyways. So perhaps Jimmy comes out to help first, since Jay is more likely to listen to his tribal chief, and then Jay only comes out second after that fails. And with Rollins having his own match, probably later in the night, the numbers game is not necessarily in the Vision's favor here, just like it was at Clash in Paris. So why could Bronson Reed win? Even though Reigns was stretchered out of Clash in Paris, Reigns still won the match. So Reed would like to even the score here, and in Reed's biggest feuds, he surprisingly lost the first match and won the second match over and over. So let's count him up. He lost a gauntlet match to Sami Zayn back in March of 2024, then beat him just 2 weeks later, before losing to him a few times after Zayn got that IC title, but we'll ignore those for now. Reed then lost to Sheamus in August of 2024, before beating him 2 weeks later. And then last year at Crown Jewel, he lost to Seth Rollins, and then ended up beating him just 2 Raws later. He then also lost to LA Knight on SmackDown back in June, but he just beat him on September 8th. So, is Reigns due to suffer this same fate here? And of course, despite being the clear bad guy here, Reed is still the hometown hero. So while Reigns is not scheduled for Raw in Perth, he is booked for Survivor Series, so he does need a reason to be in that War Games match, right? But I have to go back to the old axiom that the face needs to fight through all the underlings to get to the big bad at the end, so obviously we need to get to Rollins at the end, so we simply can't waste any more time on Bronson Reed. Respectfully, of course. So we have to move on up to Breakker next, so we're going to get Reigns getting this win, and then perhaps Breakker gets in a big spear post-match, so that Reigns still has some incentive to fight the Vision in War Games. And then of course, those two can go one-on-one somewhere down the road before WrestleMania. So Roman Reigns is our pick, and we have no strong conviction here, so we'll keep this small at a quarter unit bet. Up next, we have the final match in the rivalry between John Cena at minus 2,500 against AJ Styles at plus 800. So why Cena here? The WWE brought up that Cena has 99 PLE wins in his career, so you have to think that he's going to get number 100 before he hangs him up. And with reports that Gunther will be his final opponent, Cena seems destined to go out on his back. So he then only has this match and Survivor Series to get to number 100, and it is possible he'll be in the War Games match, so he won't even get that opportunity. And Styles has also made it clear that he'll be hanging him up in the near future as well, so there's simply no need to put Styles over on Cena's way out the door. In this epic rivalry, Styles won the first 2 one-on-one matches, with Cena winning the last 2, including his record-tying 16th WWE title at the Royal Rumble in 2017. Even though Cena tied the score 2-2 on SmackDown in February of 2018 to be added to the title match at Fastlane, Styles was the one who got the last laugh by retaining the title there that prevented that never-seen 17th title, which is to say that Cena probably should win this one to come out on top in this rivalry once and for all. But why could Styles win? Because beat up John Cena is so simple and yet still so effective. Wouldn't it be apropos for Styles to win this rivalry based on that alone? He is also going to be here just a little bit longer, so with Dom bringing up Cena backstage this week, could a Styles win turn him right back to facing Dom for that IC title? Now, a loss theoretically just leaves him hanging, but does it? As he and Dragon Lee could instead aim for that other Judgment Day group in search of the World Tag Team titles instead, which we desperately need to see something with those belts on Raw. So maybe Styles does beat up Cena his last time around, but he's still going to lose here as Cena gets win number 100 for PLEs, and Cena is the pick, and we'll even make this a half unit bet. Up next is our Women's Crown Jewel Championship with Stephanie Vaquer as the favorite at -275, and she's battling Tiffany Stratton at +185. So why Stephanie here? Well, she just became champion, and it would be an awfully rough start for her to lose in her very first match after winning that title, and then we'd hate to see Stephanie have to go down the path of everyone else circling her like chum in the water already. Instead, that apparent sickness and or poor booking that she has faced, having no matches for 1.5 months just a little while ago, weirdly now plays into her favor as she still needs to establish herself as being a worthy champion. And it hardly gets much better than beating someone who's undefeated in 2025, as Tiffy is 16-0-1-1 in all matches so far. Which it also makes it easier for Tiffy to be able to suffer her first loss of the year, especially against someone who's not even on her show. And I would guess that Jade gets one more shot following that disaster triple threat championship finish, so maybe it'll be time to switch things up, and Jade may have turned red there, but she's the only one who didn't contribute to the botched finish, and Jade's on the WrestleMania 42 poster, and not Tiffy, for what that's worth. It would be nice to also see what's in store on SmackDown before making this pick, as those two will actually be teaming up against Julia and Kiana James, and since Stephanie is the one who has history with Julia, and Kiana was trying to recruit Stephanie to her side, well, if anything weird happens, it's probably happening to Stephanie on SmackDown, and we know how that goes because the one who loses that final confrontation is the one who usually comes out on top in the end. And even though both Stephanie and Tiffy are faces, it's a little bit more likely for Tiffany to steal the pin from Stephanie on this SmackDown, and that is enough to tip the scales back to Steph for Crown Jewel. But why might it still be Tiffy time? Because once you have established an undefeated streak, it's not something you let go of easily, so maybe the only play for the SmackDown Women's Division is to have Tiffy run that table for the whole year, because the only maybe believable contenders at this point are holding the women's tag titles. I also did way too much research on the Crown Jewel Championship rings for these picks, and the question to ask was, are the rings a shoot or a work? Well, it sure seems like the rings themselves are real, as Michael Cole said during the ceremony in which Rhodes and Liv Morgan received theirs last year. That The men's version has 2.86 carats, and the women's version has 1.91 carats of diamonds, respectively. But just because the rings are made of real diamonds, it doesn't mean that the winners actually get to keep those rings, as they could still just be a prop and then are resized each year. And in fact, Liv Morgan put that ring on her middle finger instead of the ring finger, so maybe it's just kind of a generic size that'll probably fit everyone. And I didn't see a year on those rings, so that does kind of lend to them just being a prop, even though admittedly Triple H did note that the same person could win several rings. Last year, I correctly surmised that both Rhodes and Liv would win because that's who WWE would rather show as the inaugural winners of the Crown Jewel Championship. And if those rings are both real and the winners get to keep them, it is much harder to argue that Tiffany doesn't deserve a ring more than Steph at this moment for simply being in the WWE and the main roster specifically for a longer amount of time. So with no real storyline implications here, could the rings themselves, if they are real, be the only item that the WWE hands out to the wrestlers based on merit instead of the storylines? But I will admit that I did not find a true answer to the ring question, so I will fall back on wrestling logic here and say that Steph simply needs this win more, so Stephanie Vaquer is the pick. But nope, I'm not taking any chances here because I'm saying you should only sprinkle very little, or perhaps make no bet at all. And finally, we get the men's Crown Jewel Championship match with Seth Rollins as the favorite at -500, and he of course is taking on Cody Rhodes at +500. So why Rollins here? Well, are you desperate much, Seth? Because he's been staring at that watch for the past few weeks and invaded SmackDown to stomp Randy Orton, and then ignored Paul Heyman so that he ended up eating a crossroads against his opponent instead. Then of course this week he had a heart-to-heart with Heyman where Heyman really seemed to get to him, telling him that he now must win this or that everyone will lose faith in his vision, and then Heyman himself will have to rethink his decision. So it seems like Rollins simply must go to extreme lengths to win this match. So with Rhodes saying that Rollins can throw everything and everyone at him and it still won't be enough, well, maybe the one thing that Rhodes won't be able to counter is the beast himself, Brock Lesnar. And no, Lesnar is not advertised for Crown Jewel, but with a new deal and less than glowing reviews for Wrestlepalooza, WWE needs the biggest surprise possible, and of course the tea leaves are reading that Lesnar is coming back, in my opinion. So based on Heyman lathering up Rollins' desperation, and for me simply not being able to find a capable fifth heel for the War Games squad without Brock Lesnar on it, I simply think that match has to include Rollins, Breakker, and Reed. And then, since I don't think there will be an Orton turn just yet, I'm kind of just stuck with Drew McIntyre and Brock Lesnar in those last couple spots, who make capable foes to face Reigns, Jey Uso, Rhodes, and some combination of Punk, Knight, and either Orton or even Jacob Fatu based on his new feud with McIntyre. Still, I just don't see a need to have Rhodes win, as he won last year's Crown Jewel Championship and won this year's King of the Ring, and so winning this year's Crown Jewel Championship does seem like just a little bit of overload now, doesn't it? And of course, they also brought up several times that Seth Rollins is 0-3 against Rhodes, so he's not really going to drop to 0-4 against him, right? So why could Rhodes go to 4-0 against Rollins? There simply is a reason why I said in last week's Going Streakin' video that Rhodes had the longest winning streak as of last September, and he again has the longest current winning streak as of this September, at least if you don't count those no contests and draws, because Sami Zayn would actually have that record then. Nonetheless, Rhodes just doesn't lose much. That's really the point here. But Rhodes did lose his most recent match on SmackDown in a tag with Orton against the Vision, but that could simply be the placeholder of Rhodes losing the last confrontation to get him the win, though admittedly something will probably happen on this week's SmackDown, which is strangely actually taking place as this video is being published, and I suppose something strange could happen that would make Orton decide to turn on Rhodes. And if Heyman's prophecy will be fulfilled, if it's not Lesnar, then sure, there's an outside chance that is Orton turning on him now, though I doubt that. However, based on some rumors of what the finish at Wrestlepalooza was supposed to be, there is definitely a chance that this time Orton tries to help Rhodes and it just goes awry. But if I go back to those rings and everything about them is legit, then I'd like to think that Rollins has earned a ring at this point and he can use that in the storyline going further. But it doesn't do Rhodes any good to have a second ring here, so no, Rollins is our pick and we'll make this a half unit bet. And as always, here's our quick recap. We have Rio of Rhea and Io winning the tag match. Then we have Roman Reigns defeating Reed again. We have John Cena beating up AJ Styles. Then Stephanie Vaquer wins the Women's Crown Jewel Championship, and Seth Rollins wins the men's version. And as always, remember to never bet more than you can afford to lose, and also remember that this one is at 8 a.m. Eastern, so get your coffee ready for some Saturday morning wrestling, just as it was always intended to be. But before that, be sure to settle in and check out this week's Stop the 10 Count, highlighting Heyman and Rollins conversations, as well as Reigns continuing to get deeper into Jay's head. So if you missed that, be sure to go right on over here and check that out. So until next time, I am the SportsZu, and this is a podcast that needs a new name.